In this video, we are going to go over the 5 phases it takes to build a tiny house. I am not going to be doing the majority of this video because my husband Greg has been the lead on the project and he can just do a much better job at explaining each process better than I can. So here's Greg.
So the reason we're doing this is because we started building our tiny house. There's so much information out there. And I was just looking for give you an overview video so that I can kind of reverse engineer. And I couldn't find anything. So the goal with this video is if you're looking to build your own tiny house and you just want to know, what am I going to be doing here? We're going to break it down into 5 basic phases. All right. Just know that I'm a novice. All right, this is based purely on my own experience of doing this. I do have a construction in background, but I'm not an expert. So the 5 basic phases are trailer and subfloor, your frame, drying it in, P.E.M, and then the interior dry in. All right, so let's start with trailer and subfloor. We talked about trailer in the last video, so if you haven't watched that, then do it now. Go watch it because it's pretty good. But the trailer is the thing that all your stuff sits on, okay? So weight's very important. And then the next part of the first phase is to build your subfloor.
I'm at Lowe's, shopping for the material for the subfloor.
Basically, your subfloor is 4 simple parts, okay? You have your bottom skid plate, you have your insulation, you have a vapor barrier, and plywood. Again, I'm sure there are other ways to do this, but based on all the information that I acquired, this is the 4 fundamental things, okay? What your skid plate is it's a piece of metal that is screwed to the bottom of your trailer that is designed to protect it from things coming up into it. So picture you're driving down the road, you roll over something and hits the bottom of your trailer, your skid plate helps protect it. It's usually a piece of sheet metal, or we actually used tin roofing. All right, we just screwed it underneath with 5/16 self-tapping screws. So once you get your skid plate in, you put the insulation on top of that. You could do foam board insulation, you can do fiberglass insulation. There are many different types. You just need to know that after the skid plate goes the insulation. All right, then you put the vapor barrier, which you can see is right here. Have you ever gone camping and you wake up in the morning and the tent's wet? That's what your vapor barrier protects you against. You won't just put your vapor barrier on the subfloor, you'll also put it on the rest of the house. So everything is vapor proof.
It's so windy.
And then once you put your vapor barrier on the subfloor, then you put on the plywood. And the type of plywood you're looking for is tongue and groove. So it sits in like this. And then that way, when you're stepping on the seams, it doesn't go like that. So after you get the subfloor in, it's time to build the frame. The frame for your tiny house is what you'll put everything mounted onto, right? It's the structure. It's out of wood. Some people do light gauge steel. What we did, because we're crazy, we did tube steel. All right, next, dry it in. Once your frame is in place, make sure no water gets in, all right? That involves insulation. And then you do your vapor barrier, some sort of exterior paneling, sheathing. Also includes windows and doors, your roof, and then trim around the edges. Anytime there's gaps or cracks, anything that connects to each other, you want to make sure that no water can get in that.
Oh, my toe pal!
Once you are generally done with that, this is what the interior will look like. All right, so next is P.E.M. You're probably like, what the heck does P.E.M. stand for? P.E.M. stands for plumbing, electrical, and mechanical. Mechanical is just air conditioning. You could totally remove that if you're not planning on providing cooling to your home. We're from Florida, so we got to have our air conditioning, baby. So to me, this was the hardest part. Okay, it required the most research, it required the most expertise. In addition, these different elements, so your plumbing, your electrical, mechanical, are interwoven and dependent on one another. So there were a few really good videos that I watched that gave me the most bang for my buck as far as understanding these fundamental components. So we're gonna link to those. We've got one for electrical that explains basic circuitry, and then one for tiny house plumbing, which was really helpful in getting an understanding of the plumbing system. And then mechanical, I couldn't really find one actually. So if anybody watching finds one, I'd love to see it. So what we did is we actually diagrammed all of it out before we installed it. We actually took spray paint and we sprayed on to get an idea of where these things would line up. But more specifically, we created a little diagram here. So here's a diagram of the electrical, and here's a diagram of the plumbing. I used a little free program called Glyphy to do this, but you could easily do it by hand. For your plumbing, there's only a few things you need to know. So you can do PEX, you can do PVC. The size generally is 1/2 inch. So only a few fundamental components you need to know about your plumbing. Toilet, sink, shower, hot water and cold water lines, and those lines are independent of one another. This diagram was the best diagram I found on the internet that overviewed this whole thing. Whoever created this, thank you, because it saved my life. Okay, and then you have gray water and black water. So those are your storage tanks. Gray water is for anything that's not sewage. Black water, it's for the poopy. We actually are doing a composting toilet, so we didn't have a black water tank, but that depends on your situation. After that, you have freshwater tank, which I showed you that earlier. And then you have your hot water heater. You can do electric or propane. We chose to do propane because for the electrical system, anything that involved altering the temperature of something was insanely high on the energy cost. So we just couldn't do it, but that's up to you. And then after that, you need your water pump. It's kind of technically that's electrical, but it's part of the water system, so I'm including it here. And then your inlet. So there's two types. You have a gravity fed inlet and then a city or pressurized. All right, so now that's plumbing. Let's talk about electrical. The biggest thing is your amperage. Typically, you're gonna have a 30 amp hookup. Most RV places provide 30 amp outlets or connections. So the biggest thing is wire. Romex, the wire that you're looking for, 12-2. AWG equals American wire gauge. That's a gauge of the wire or the thickness of it. So the bigger the number means the thinner the wire. Does that make sense? No, but that's the way that it is. For the AC is 8 to 10 gauge wire, and most tiny house units are single phase. Circuits are typically 20 amps each, and the big components that you need are lights, switches, outlets. I ran all the wire. I mapped out all of the electrical. I hooked up all of the boxes, all of the switches, and I hired an electrician to connect the circuit breaker, hook up the power, and make sure that it was working properly. That saved me a lot of money. Last part is to dry it in. You are doing the wall paneling, you're doing the flooring, you're doing the cabinets, doing the sinks, all the fixtures, you're painting. This is all of the finishing work. I'm calling that the interior dry in. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that this gave a nice big overview and at least gave you some direction that you need to know how to approach this whole project. I will tell you though, there is nothing more satisfying than knowing that you built your own house, right? That's something that nobody could ever take away from you. So if you're thinking about it or you have started and you're wanting to do it, I hope this video serves you and it helps make your project easier. Okay, take care.
Taylor is going to join me in the video, woohoo! Because she's cranky. It's the camera. Ooh, bright lights. Does that taste good? Oh, spit up. Oh, let's go get a towel.